Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about the four cornerstones of the conjugate or Westside method. Because this gets confusing for a lot of people because they don't understand that these are things that are all woven together to work as a system. And in this video I'm not going to really cover the way that it's periodized because you guys have a pretty good idea of that from watching my training, watching other stuff. But people lose sight of the fact that they're thinking that, well, it's all about just maxing out, or it's just a speed work. Now, the reality is, it is a combination of four different cornerstones. There's four pillars that build this system. The first one being max effort work. The second being dynamic effort work, or speed training. The third being repetition work. And the fourth being general physical preparedness and restoration. Okay, and the latter is always done in kind of its own workouts, as off days or subsequent workouts and things. So what do we mean by max effort work? It's a system of rotating one rep max lift so that you do not do the same exercise too often. But you are coming in and hitting one rep maxes. Like, I'll get people who be like, Jason, some of these are grinder. You miss lifts. You shouldn't be doing that. It's like, no. I mean, how do you know that you hit a max if you don't ever take them to the edge? You are supposed to be hitting max effort lifts. Now, are these psyched up, screaming, yelling maxes? No. They're relatively calm, sometimes a bit of psychological arousal, and just coming in and hitting a max. It's not screaming. It's not yelling. Right? You're not taking a bunch of pre-workouts. You're not eating a handful of Anadrol before you jump in and do them. Right? It's not the same as a competition max, but it is a one rep max. It is a one rep max. And you come in and you hit the one rep max. And the whole idea behind that is you are trying to hit a PR every time you hit a lift. Okay? That's one reason you do so many lifts, is because you want to PR every week year round. And if you have different lift variations, they are PRs. And that's multifold in nature. Number one, it's teaching you how to max out all the time. Number two, it's building confidence because you are PRing all the time. Even if you have to incorporate new lifts to hit those PRs, that's what you do. It builds confidence. Number three, it avoids overuse injuries. All right, all these concerns and fears that people have of maxing out, of the injury risk, actually generally involves connective tissue damage from overuse. If you're changing the lifts that you're maxing out all the time on, it actually reduces the risk to nearly zero. Again, if you understand how to max out. Right? You're coming in and using remotely decent form, and you're not screaming and yelling and flopping weights around. You're doing a calm, controlled everything that you have for one rep. Okay? Max effort. And the reason the system works is because you rotate the lifts. That's what makes the injury risk, the overuse, everything else drop to nearly zero. And you avoid burnout. Number two, dynamic effort work. What do we mean by that? Speed work. And it needs to be fast. And when I say fast, it needs to be fast, right? You guys see me doing speed squats. Right? They're explosive. And in this case of that bar, I'm using 55% of my squat max, or that particular barbell's max, with 25% of my max and chain weight added. Okay? So if you are using 50% plus 25%, let's say you lift 500 pounds on an exercise. What's half of that? 250. You put 250 pounds on the bar. Then you add chain or bands equal to 25% of your max. So if you lift 500, it's 125. Pretty straightforward. It's done for very low reps. Depending on the lift you're doing, it's 1, 2, or 3 reps. And it's not always done on just a squat, bench, and deadlift. There are other lifts that you can do as speed work. I'm not going to really cover those here, but overhead pressing is one example that people do. Floor pressing is another. I've heard of guys doing their speed work with cleans and snatches. Doable, right? It's doable. Not saying it should be the norm always, but depends on what you're doing. Dynamic effort work. Compensatory acceleration with moderately light weights for maximum speed. In a perfect world, we do them against bands and chains. But on squatting, you do box squats for a reason. It's not arbitrarily selected. No, you can't do pause squats and get the same thing. Like, that would be the worst choice. A pause squat would be the actual worst form of squat you could possibly do for this. But the point is speed work. Maximum force generation. Now, could you accompany some speed work with Olympic lifts? Yes. Can you accompany it with jumping and plyometrics? Yes. It actually fits nicely. It doesn't replace the speed work, but if you want to have supplemental work to the speed work, that makes sense. Just like some guys say, well, I want to do some heavy fives. There's some supplemental work to my max work. Well, go ahead. It works really nicely, right? It can work really well. Some 5-rep floor presses right after you're benching, you bet. Same thing, some Olympic lifts done for 3s, 4s, 5s. You bet. It works great with the speed training. And all of that falls also under the repetition method. What is a repetition method? Hypertrophy work. Okay? Let's not stand around and goof off and pretend. We can argue that there's good evidence that if enough singles are done, you could get maximum hypertrophy. There's evidence that if you do enough triples, you get good hypertrophy. No one's arguing that. I agree with that. The data supports it. But let's come in and do some rep work. Why? It's efficient to come in and do some higher reps. What would I define as repetition? Well, Westside's usually really high reps a lot of times, but in general, anything in the 5 to 20 rep range. Okay? Anything from 5 to 20 reps counts as repetition work as long as it's challenging reps or possibly taken to failure. Right? Can it be done on your big movements? You bet you can do floor presses. You can do Olympic lifts. You can do your good mornings as low as 5s. Absolutely. Overhead pressing can be done with 5s. A lot of smaller exercises lend themselves better to high reps. A lot of your upper back work, you probably want to do 10 plus. Smaller exercises, you want to go even higher oftentimes. Triceps, biceps, sometimes your hamstring work. Right? Some of those things could be run up really high, 15s, 20s. Hypertrophy training. But in general, what you would normally see bodybuilder-oriented training towards, which is going to be 5 to 20 reps. Notice I don't just limit it down to 10s or 8 to 12. No, 5 to 20. Now, can there be overlap? Yes, there can. Heavy 5s can count as your rep work, but lend themselves to certain elements of the max effort. Right? Sure they can. Doesn't all have to be really high reps. Same thing, a lot of those 5s, certain exercises, if they're explosive enough movements, cleans, high pulls, snatches, can lend itself over really nicely to your speed training, you bet. But we're generally chasing muscle growth. We're usually looking to build up our entire body with this stuff, or particularly our weak links, because we get a lot of hypertrophy from the dynamic work. You can get jacked off dynamic work. But these other lifts fill in the gaps to get you generally big, and particularly your weak links. And if you have a muscle that really is a weak link, you're going to want to do a bunch of 10s, 15s, 20s for it, right? Your rear delts, upper back traps, triceps are limiting you. You're probably going to want to do some 15 and 20 rep sets, and probably a lot of them for those muscles, right? 5 sets of 20 for your triceps, perfectly reasonable. If they're a weak link, you need to bring them up. Rep work is the fastest way to bring up a lagging muscle and get bigger and thicker. All right, general physical preparedness restoration. What does that mean? Conditioning work, sled drags, loaded carries. What you guys think of as strength-based conditioning. Well, you can watch it what any CrossFit gym does. Look at their WODs. Their WODs are based on GPP. All right, conditioning. In my case, I don't have a good way to do sleds. I do a lot of weighted carries right now. I do farmer's walks. I have the compact handles. I do them 3 days a week. That is my conditioning. General physical preparedness. I do a bunch of cleans and things right now on my off days. Restoration work. What does that mean? High rep band work, reverse hypers, things like that. Coming in and then taking some of your muscles that need the extra recovery, doing really high rep stuff. I do most of my restoration work, obviously on my GPP days. It's all mixed together with reverse hypers. That is the tool I use. Very common in the Westside system. I do 3 to 5 sets of 20 to 30 reps on all my off days to help with low back restoration recovery, lots of training volume, extra rep work for hamstrings, low back. All right. Maybe a bunch of rear delt stuff, rotator cuffs. I do a bunch of ab work on those days too. High rep standing band crunches, hanging leg raises. If I want to add weight, hanging leg raises with chains. reverse hypers, a lot of weighted carries. You need to be in shape. That is the other part of the system. The system is also built upon the fact that you have a high work capacity and you are in shape. And we get in shape with very high intensity cardio or strength-based conditioning work. Again, barbell complexes, weighted carries, sled drags, prowlers. This gets you into shape. And you need to be in shape in order to complete some of these workouts, to handle the training volumes, to handle the dynamic effort work. You need to be in shape. Conditioning matters. Same thing with the restoration. Coming in and doing all that really high rep work, for example, on my reverse hyper helps with the restoration of my low back. And it helps hypertrophy, all that stuff, get blood flow to all of those muscles, because that stuff is a high priority for me. I hammer it into the ground. That recovery matters, that traction. And that's what I use. Other people can use a lot of band work and other stuff. Depends on what tools you have available. But that's the fourth cornerstone, is general physical preparedness and restoration and recovery work, active recovery. All right, that is what this system is built upon. You are addressing every major performance element. That's why this system builds athletes, not just powerlifters. Right? That's why it works for NFL players, MMA fighters, everyone else also. Athletic-based strength and maximum strength system. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.